Pro Audio Secrets, a show that helps you to find your own voice in sound.
Most of the major AI models have learned in a way that is not truly ethical at all. I feel that we've crossed the line where we're not going back anymore. One of the main reasons why I ended up working for the company versus being a freelancer, I found the freelance existence exhausting, just because the project-to-project nature of it, you never really know what's going to happen. Audio is still quite a conservative industry in a lot of ways. Essentially, we're kind of doing the same things we were 20, 30 years ago with, a DAW basically being a digital tape machine. But one thing I do want to come back to is your rapping career. You can't just throw that in and expect me not to pick up on it. So tell me more about that.
AI seems to be everywhere nowadays, and many people fear that their jobs will be taken by AI sooner or later. That is also true in our industry as sound professionals. In this episode of Pro Audio Secrets, I'm talking with Head of Product at Krotos, Matthew Collings, and we tackle these questions about AI and where it is used in their tools and in what way and what they actually help people with their tools. We talk about the industry and how we see things evolving and what I and himself as well thinks that people actually need to do nowadays to stay relevant and to stay in their jobs and getting paid work. If that's interesting to you, this episode is for you. Let's go. Hey, Matthew, it's very great to have you on the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Head of Product from Krotos.
Yes.
So can you give us a little introduction to what you're currently doing and where you're coming from in terms of audio?
Sure. Yeah. So what I'm currently doing and what we are currently doing is working on tools for people in post-production, video games, and anything else in between. Our mission as companies to change the way people work with sound. We try to make it more accessible, lower the barrier of entry to doing that type of work, and making audio, making sound more performative, more intuitive, more accessible. So right now we're working on a lot of ways to integrate AI into what we're doing, which I'm sure will be a big topic of conversation. It's not the sole thing we're doing. Right now we're working on that as a way to power some of the workflows and integrations that we're working on. That's our main focus. And my role is kind of being a flexible middleman between all the people working on all the aspects of that problem, be that engineering, design, marketing, executive level stuff. It's exciting and it's challenging, and it's a very interesting time to be in audio and technology in general.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned performative audio. That's also my kind of thing as a Foley artist. And with your tools, you have it more in the box, let's say, but there's still ways to perform with your mouth or with the mouse and to morph sounds, and I find that really interesting.
Yeah, thank you.
As I know that you are already a long time with the company, more than 10 years or around that time, right?
Yes, definitely more than 10 years now. So been there pretty much since the beginning. So we started out with a product called Dehumanizer, which is still going, still one of our big products. People know us a lot from that. And then we've made a number of products that, carry that DNA of creativity, approaching sound differently, performability, using your mouth, other audio to control other audio, using your mouse, all this type of stuff. Like we're trying to carry that DNA through everything we do, and people seem to be excited by that, which excites us.
And what did you do before that? Before you joined Krotos?
Before that, I was a freelance sound person in many capacities. I used to do a lot of sound, a lot of composition for film, theatre, anything I can get my hands on. Released a lot of records as well. So came to sound really from the music angle, then entered into sound design because I was always really interested in the quality and nature of sound. Even in like my musical work, was always really interested in like those aspects as well. That's my background. And I stumbled into making audio software as part of my master's degree, which was 16 years ago. And that was a great adventure. And that's kind of how I ended up being involved in Krotos, because we were doing software made with Max MSP, which is what I'd studied and used a lot on pretty much every project up to that point. So we started by making those things, and then we moved into a more proper software company, building plugins and other types of technology.
So you came from music, evolved into sound design, and then also developed some programming skills, let's say. And now you're compounding all of this as your new role as head of product.
Yeah, I smash it all into one pot and try to navigate through all of it. It's fun. Yeah, it's yeah.
Yeah, before we started the conversation on the recording, you said you're running around like a headless chicken and having so many open tasks at once. How is it for you these days to work as head of product?
There's always a new challenge. There's always a new problem to solve. There's always a new challenge to unpick. And we're also trying to innovate. We're trying to do different things, and we're all at the company. We're really excited about that. So every time we make a product, we stumble through it because no one's really done that before, and that's exciting as well. So that's a really fun part of the job. And you're always on your toes. You're always doing different things. Always talking to different people in different disciplines as well. So engineering or design or marketing or partners, customers. You end up doing a lot of things, and I really enjoy it.
And what is then the outcome of your work? What is the main goal that you are looking for? What does a successful day for you look like?
A successful day for me would be we have taken a step forward to help customers, create a new exciting solution to help people with the challenges they have at work, applying sound to their projects, to moving image or interactive media. That's kind of what really motivates me, and I love being able to put these solutions in front of people and seeing their reactions. That's most rewarding thing. Most of the time, they seem to really enjoy it. Not all the time, but most of the time, that's why I do. That's why I do the work.
And your background as a musician and also sound professional, how does that integrate in this whole now bigger picture kind of work that you do?
Very closely, because a lot of the work that we do, I would say is half art, half science, and I kind of bridge those disciplines because I'm more art than science, but I understand a lot of the scientific and the technical and the data-based approaches to all these things. I kind of see like a lot of the work I do is a bit like being it's a lot like being a composer working with other musicians, or being a film director, or almost as a way you work with all these people with different skills, and you're just kind of directing that towards a vision, like that vision being, what is the product? What is the thing you put in front of people? How do they use it? Why do they use it? What do they get from it? How can you do things that no one else can do? And I can't do it all myself. So you have to collaborate and direct and guide people through your understanding of that problem as a creative and as a technical person to get to an end result. So I don't know, it's a bit of voodoo, I think. Sometimes I think it's a miracle that we get where we get.
Yeah, I mean, you have already quite a journey behind you. The tools are very innovative. So when I think about Krotos, it's not the classical plugin. You're not selling another EQ or another compressor, or so there. Where did this inspiration come from? Where did you see a certain need in the industry to get more creative tools, or was it more that you wanted to build tools for the gaming industry in particular? Because I saw on your website a lot of gaming companies are your direct clients. Where did this whole idea of we build something completely different come from?
So the company started with Orpheus, the founder, who was doing a project at university, which was he needed to make a a lot of monster noises for a kind of an interactive app that he was building with some friends, and realized that designing monster and creature noises is actually really tedious and complicated. You need loads of sound recordings and loads of plugins, and before you know it, you've got 10 open windows in front of you and you're lost. So he was like, well, can I not try and make one thing that makes it easier? So a lot of it was about trying to streamline process, streamline creativity, but then still allow performative aspects in there. So with Dehumanizer, you use your voice to create those sounds, and it was much more intuitive than having 10 different plugin windows where you try a different knob and all that type of stuff. So that's sort of the DNA of everything we try to do. We try to do that. We try to streamline things, and I think we all have how do I put it, like a healthy mistrust in the traditional way of doing audio, even though we're knowledgeable about it. Like, we want to try and do it differently. I think like audio is still quite a conservative industry in a lot of ways. That has its place, but essentially we're kind of doing the same things we were 20, 30 years ago with, a DAW basically being a digital tape machine, and all the ways of processing and manipulating and layering and finding sound is basically like a library and something that's a digital mixing desk. So it's essentially, an approximation of an analog studio, which is no longer what people do. Yeah. And there are different ways of rolling those problems that may be more appropriate to the process technology in the world in which we live in now. So that's kind of what we try to do.
Yeah, I get it. When I was a sound effects editor in my early years of my career, let's say in the first 7 years, I was more on dialogue, drama-based movies, and we never did the sci-fi stuff. And I remember back then we installed native instruments, the complete suite, and put the keyboard in there. And the goal was, once we have this massively creative project, we can then use this and make some crazy sounds. Those movies, they never really came, and the thing was just standing there. We never even had the time to properly look into it and install everything and get our hands on it. So we never got really knowledgeable about it. And now I feel with Krotos Studio, things are way more intuitive, and you can just install it and get things done, and you see some results really quickly, and you don't need that ramp up time of, I don't know, a week of dialing into some things and understanding the whole thing and how to hook it up in the MIDI structure. And so, Am I right? Is this the correct analysis?
That's definitely the goal. And I'm glad that you described it like that. And that's been your experience so far. Because that's the objective. We want, I think, also referencing, your skills and what you do, we want the digital experience of making sound and making real sound to be similar to, the performative experience of doing Foley. You have a microphone, you have skills, and you have objects, and you find creative ways of combining those objects, moving those objects, and to create sound to picture, and a lot of, what we do is really inspired by Foley artists, and also, like you said, game audio. We're really in awe of all those artists and the skills that they have, and also people doing post-production and editing sound. Incredibly skilled people, but we just think there are ways to approach those problems differently and make it a bit more immediate and more accessible to people. It's always interesting when you see, people come into audio, and you see a lot of people who just taper off or just get really intimidated by the barrier of entry of how you have to understand so much audio terminology and technology in order to create a great sound. And I think, when you talk about native instruments, I think they were a great proponent of that. There are amazing contact instruments now that, you can create amazing sound without knowing too much, which is awesome. Because it's great, because then you're just getting your vision out, and we try to do that as well.
Yeah, as I said, I never got into this whole world of sci-fi sound design and synthesis, and this is not really my expertise. Before I could look into this, I became a full-time Foley artist, and then oftentimes it's more delivering some textures for other people that then can go ahead and use those sounds and make something else out of it. On top of course, the normal traditional Foley stuff, footsteps, cloth, props, which is very bound to what's on screen. But I also like to produce
certain loops or textures that other people then go ahead and do something else with it. And I always wondered how this can be easier. And with Krotos Studio, I saw that you can put a couple of sounds in one basket, let's say, and then blend them together and make kind of whooshes and risers and pretty intuitively. And do you think you already teach beginners ways of looking into audio or understanding audio with your tools? Or what is the skill set that someone needs when they actually start using your tools?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that we do excite and inspire people in that way. I mean, I've been lucky enough to see that firsthand. One of the things I do almost every year is show our tools to students, and it's really inspiring to see like their faces light up, almost where they realise that, oh, okay, you know, I can make something that almost sounds like a movie. I wouldn't say it sounds exactly like a movie, and they may not understand the nuance of taking it the rest of that, 20, 30%, but they've got, 70% of the way really fast, which is great. And that can inspire you to then add your own recordings, add your own Foley recordings, go deeper, but you've gotten over that barrier. And I think, all that people really need with our tools is kind of a sense of curiosity and, to explore sound. I mean, we're all sound geeks. We're here because we like sound. We just want to make it, we just want to make fun sounds as easily as possible, right? That's kind of what we're all here to do. So, we want to do that.
Quick one. There's actually one thing completely for free that you could do in order to help me continue doing this. It's subscribe or follow the channel wherever you watch or listen to that. If you haven't done so, please have a look now and just hit that button. It helps me and it's a free thing again. Thanks for doing this. Let's go back to the episode. So you can basically get you can learn taste also with your tools. Because when you get that 70% that already sounds like a movie, you then understand, okay, I have 70% now. I did it very easily, but where's the rest? And then you can start dig into the details of sound design and the nuances and what a scene actually needs and how to put focus into something. I think that's a really great approach, to help people to overcome that first barrier, especially when kind of mentorship or interning at certain companies gets harder and harder.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think taste is a difficult thing to learn, and I think that always that last 20% is the thing that really makes the difference between professionals and amateur users, and that's what differentiates like really high quality audio and content from the rest. It's not necessarily the 50%; it's that last 20%. But I think we're able to get you to that point as fast as possible, and then it's your taste and your skill and all the other nuances that will then get you that extra 20%. But I think we want to get you the furthest down that path as quickly as possible, and rather than spending hours and hours and hours over something, if you can spend minutes on that and you get that sound, you have a lot more time then to think about what story is that sound telling? Is it the right use of that sound right now, and all these things, and those are really, really important things. So I think we help people a lot with those moments as well, and also encouraging people to start to use Foley in their projects. I think one of the things with Krotos Studio is like it seemed to open that to a lot of people who are like, well, I never did it before because it was so difficult. Now I'm doing it all the time. I think that opens their mind to using Foley in loads of ways that they just never occurred to them before, which I think is great because it's an incredible art.
In which way do they use it? Do they record their own set of sounds and put it into Krotos Studio, or do they, let's say, perform with Krotos Studio and have then their Foley layer in their project from the tool?
I think it's people will use Krotos Studio as a starting point to get particularly footsteps and cloth as a first pass in, but they would never have done that before because they've said, okay, well, to do that, to edit that and do it is it's so time consuming and tedious. I'm not even going to do it. I'm just going to try and use sound in another way, like maybe use music to try and carry that narrative. Whereas now they're looking at using other aspects of sound because it's become more accessible to them. I think that's really exciting. And I see those people going on to use their own recordings and use all this stuff because they've crossed that barrier of like, well, I can use non-musical sound to tell a story, which is what a lot of us are trying to do. So it's like fighting that corner and getting people to think like that. I think we're helping with that as well.
So it's that mediums that didn't have, let's say, Foley layers in the production, they now have it because of your tools and maybe other tools that have similar options.
Yeah, I mean, I was speaking to someone who was on a project recently, and they were doing a lot of like previs stuff, and they were using our video to sound tool to get like a quick cloth pass on it, and they were saying that works pretty well a lot of the time. I'm 100% sure they won't keep that cloth pass. They will get someone to do that properly, but they've got that in as part of the project right away. Right, they're realizing that this type of sound can really elevate the project and elevate it like at the first stage, rather than having to wait to post-production to add sound. So it's like getting that sound into a project really early. I'm confident that they'll replace it later, which is obviously totally fine, but it allows people to get sound in really early into a project. And again, like all of us audio people want to sell the value of sound as well. And I think that's also something we advocate for a lot, because most other people on a production, they don't realize how important sound is at all. I mean, the fact that it's usually left to the last 1% of the production time, let's get the sound in, is obviously a huge pity.
Not enough budget.
Yeah, exactly, right. And the budgetary thing is something that everyone struggles with. I think particularly these days, there are obviously big challenges in the industry, but I think the more we can all advocate for sound overall and earlier in projects, the better we will all be as well.
So it's not only the creator that now has maybe a deeper sound texture in their videos, it's also high-level productions, and then the picture editor maybe gets more sound into the timeline than what they did before.
Yeah, that definitely seems to be the case. And again, and those editors that I speak to who use it, they're not, they're aware that most of that sound is going to be replaced, but they're being asked earlier and earlier to have a complete sonic picture to show to a producer whilst they're editing, and that's the requirement on them these days. So again, we help them with that. They're aware that a lot of that will then be replaced later on, but it's getting quality sound in faster, earlier, cheaper into the project. I think that's something that we've done well and been a part of recently.
Yeah, it's really an interesting process. A lot of people don't really focus too much on sound, and I feel the industry somehow is not even going into a direction where sound matters more and more. It seems that it matters less and less. Yeah, I see that from my friend who is working on set on the highest level, and oftentimes he's telling me, look, I'm a boom operator, and sound is most of the time the last important thing on set, and they talk over the performances, and they have wind machines and snow machines and this and that going, and they go all in for ADR, and that was really frustrating for him. Yeah. That's why he then joined me in the Foley stage. I gave him a little bit of education here. It didn't work out for the two of us for personal reasons. He went back to Budapest for his family, and now he's back on set with a different mindset. Now he's not as eager, to produce the best sound, because he knows it's not a thing anymore. He's more eager to get the best possible result for the client, what they actually look for. And I think that's a more healthy way to think about it. But then, we have to get this sound into the production at the end. And when your tool helps then on the post-production side to get more quality sound in, that people can have a better understanding, hopefully then the funding also starts to rise up again for audio post-production.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope so too. The on-set stuff is kind of fascinating, and it seems to be either one of two extremes of people who really, really find it really, really important to capture particularly dialogue and everything on set, despite those conditions, and then that's a huge challenge. Or people who just completely ignore it, and they'll be like, it doesn't matter, we're going to replace it all in post anyway, so we won't capture anything on set, or we'll know it's complete trash and we'll just use it to, replace. It seems like there isn't a happy medium in between, which is interesting. And then from the tool set side, there's obviously been a huge rise in denoising, like cleaning tools over the last 5 to 10 years because of this problem, right? Because there's so much yeah, there's so little sort of usable dialogue and usable audio that's produced on set these days. Like that seems to be, such a low priority for people, which is obviously a huge pity.
And how is it in the games? I saw one of the quotes of people who use your tools, I think from CD Projekt Red, that they saved a lot of time on the footsteps for The Witcher or something.
Yeah, that was for a trailer for the new Witcher, which came out quite a while ago now. But obviously, yeah, that sound designer was under a lot of pressure to turn around a lot of stuff, and he used Krotos Studio a lot for footsteps and Foley, I think in particular, for that cinematic. And that was great. Obviously saved him a lot of time, and I suspect that saved him a lot of time that he could then spend on the mix or on other aspects of that, which is great. And it was great to be involved in that project.
And the tool you mentioned, sound to video to sound, is that included in Krotos Studio, or how does it work? How can you actually generate these sounds?
Yeah, so it is part of Krotos Studio. So Krotos Studio is sort of evolving now into a kind of sound platform that includes lots of tools. So it, depending on the tier of your license, you also get access to a huge traditional sound library as well. So there's the technology, there's the sound library, there's the plugins, and now video to sound as well. Until very recently, video sound was like in a browser. You had to take a section of your video, put it in a browser, and it would do the analysis, synchronize sound for you. But we have a version that runs directly in Adobe Premiere right now that's in beta. So that allows video editors to use a simpler UI and to get synchronized sound immediately into their edit, like really fast. And once it is there, then you can then use those tools to customize it. So the idea is that it gives you a first pass really fast that you can then edit and work with. That's the intention of that. And the important thing with all those tools is we're not using generative AI. Like all the sounds that are being added are real sounds recorded by real sound designers. The AI stuff is just assisting in the choice of what goes there, what's layered, how that's synchronized, and all this stuff. So we see that as a sort of next generation of sound design synchronization tools to get people getting sound into their projects faster, but always allowing like the customization, like unlike any other AI audio tool I've seen, which just gives you a stereo bounce of 10 things smashed into stereo things that you can't control. Everything we do in video to sound is broken out into layers, so you can chop and change it. You can use as much or as little as you want. We're still giving you control over it, and it being real sound is also really, really important to us. So that's what we're working on right now.
So it's breaking down the sound that is needed for the video in sections like footsteps, cloth, whatever, vehicles and guns or...
So at the moment it focuses on ambiances, cloth, footsteps, and transition sounds, so wishes, impacts, all this type of stuff. And it'll do a pass and add all those things automatically onto that timeline in Premiere now, but to other hosts later. And that's, the thing I love about that is it gives me a really good starting point really fast. I'm going to change a lot of it, but it gets me from zero to something pretty good really, really fast, like within a few minutes. And then again, it allows me to think more creatively about those choices. Like, is that the right wind for this scene, for example, rather than having to go and find lots of winds and audition them and all that type of stuff. And having that immediately synchronized in your edit is a really powerful thing. Like I said, this only works in Premiere right now, but we're looking at rolling that out to lots of other hosts, including DAWs, hopefully later on.
And you mentioned you also sell sound libraries. How is that working? Do you have your own recordists that work for you full time, or do you have creators that you buy the sounds from, and then people can actually buy it from you separately as well, or is it always coming with the tool?
No, it doesn't always come with the tool. So you can buy sound libraries from us from krotosaudio.com. A lot of those libraries can be bought as a straight up library. We make those affordable and accessible. And then we have lots of libraries that integrate with our plugins. So you can buy a library that comes with integration with Reformer Pro, for example, or with Weaponizer. So when they have presets, so you can load those up and immediately make use of those sounds. So those are sounds either that we've made, recorded, and designed, or from partners. We do have a full-time sound designer with us, Molly, who's amazing. And we also work with partners all over the world to record sound for us, also to design. it's a big balance of lots of things. But we always have like this sort of synergy of, you know, actual recorded sound and the technology that then employs that sound. It's always this sort of symbiosis between the two. That's always been the case and always will be the case. So like recording sound and library sound is always a big part of what we do.
And let's assume I don't really know what generative AI is. Can you explain that for me from a technical point of view?
Yeah, sure. I mean, my take on it, at least, is, you know, the typical, like a typical example of generative AI would be, you know, you go to ChatGPT and you ask it to, I don't know, write you a poem, right? That poem's not real. It doesn't exist anywhere. It's essentially like synthesized by AI technology that is, you know, it's learnt about how poems are made, legitimately or legally or not, and then is then synthesizing you this poem, and then that principle is applied to visual medium. So if you say, you know, make me an image of a person at a mixing desk, it's going to synthesize this thing. So it's not real, right? It's learnt how to synthesize these things, and there are obviously lots of tricky questions around the legality and ethical nature of that learning that a lot of people have answers to. A lot of them don't. So this stuff's problematic for that angle. And it's also problematic because, you know, the quality of these generated things varies wildly. I mean, for me, I can usually see if something is generative or not. That's not always the case, but I think that's true for a lot of people as well, as you can notice if an image is generatively made. People send me documents all the time that I can very easily confidently say has been made with ChatGPT. But for me, the big difference with generative AI is it's synthesized. Like, it's not a real thing, right? It's a representation of something that it's learned and it's synthesized it from scratch. So what we do is that we don't synthesize things from scratch. We use real sound by real people, recorded by us and other sound designers and other quality professionals. And we use the AI to select and synchronize those. So we're not, you know, making these things up out of thin air based on the performance of a model that may have been trained on things that it doesn't legally or ethically have access to. You know, we're not doing that. We don't have any interest in doing that. A lot of people are doing that, and that's obviously one of the big caveats with using generative AI in creative disciplines.
Okay, so the thing is that the AI learns from materials that people haven't really granted their acceptance to it, that they allow that my art is being used for the AI to train on it.
Yeah,
that's the caveat, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And
but
again,
people then, but how? I mean, in the end, there must be a certain consent. Where is the consent then? By just using Google or using Instagram or uploading my music to whatever, Spotify, then I'm already kind of agreeing in the terms, or?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I can't confidently say because I haven't read the terms of Instagram, Google, or Spotify, but I would be confident that somewhere in there is a clause that by submitting your music to these things or by Googling these things or by adding your images to Instagram, we will be using them for machine learning training. I'm 100% confident, okay, 90% confident that those clauses exist. And I think one of the challenges we have as individuals in the modern age is that we don't really acknowledge that the content you put on the internet through these forums is being used for those terms, for those means, right? So, you know, what do you do about that? You can opt out and not use them. Of course you can. But you're kind of tied to using them for lots of things, for promoting your work, for, you know, trying to find work, for, you know, communicating with your friends and family and all this type of stuff. It puts you in a tricky position. But I mean, it's kind of well documented that most of the major AI models have learned in this way, like in a way that is not truly ethical at all, unfortunately. Real question is, what do we do it? It's out there now. People are using them. People use them every day, you know. It's a tricky one.
Definitely. I mean, in the end, when people agree to those terms and conditions, it's hard to then say, I haven't agreed to it in a way. I'm not saying that this is totally fine, but on the other hand, everyone has, I mean, there are artists who completely shut down their whole ecosystem and not release music on any major platforms and only have their private community and then going live once a week on Zoom or something for their audience and sell their music on Substack or something. Like I just have the guy Yassine Bey in mind, who seems to do that. So yeah, it's a huge issue, and I was kind of confronted with that because we use some generative AI to come up with these B-roll videos of my alter ego in this GTA San Andreas world, which we with my team and I we just had that idea that this would be a cool thing to have, to have some B-roll and show some situations that I maybe explain from my own story, and to get some visuals on that. And also it puts me into this place of where I was as a gamer back in the days. We played a lot of GTA San Andreas, and so that's the idea where it comes from. And as long as we just used it as B-roll video, no one ever commented even on that. But then we started to do some carousels where we also used this character, and then had some information in the carousel. And then people started to say, oh, this is made with AI. We unfollow Bastian. And I didn't really saw that this is coming to me, and this is like such a heated topic to people that some people are very strict on, okay, I don't want this in my feed, or I don't want this in my life. So it seems that you have kind of figured it out because you're not using this type of technology. But do you still are like kind of involved in this discussion, or what do you think about the ethicality? Is it ethical or not to go this way, or can we avoid it, or what should we do about it from your point of view?
I mean, that's a very good philosophical question. I mean, the easy answer is that there are companies out there ethically training AI models, right? That does exist. There are, for example, in the AI music space, there are companies like Suno and Udio who are clearly don't have any reasonable answer to the, where did you get the training data from? Is it ethical? I don't think I've ever heard them answer that question, yes or no, but it's clear that there's a lot of grey area. I think as far as I know, the model used by 11 Labs, for example, for their music is actually is ethically trained and results in royalties being paid to composers who have been used as training data. I think that's very positive, and I don't see the AI thing going away. I think we've crossed this threshold where people have kind of accepted that it exists. People use it obviously en masse. As much as we may feel uncomfortable with it, we've kind of crossed that valley where we're going to use it even though we feel uncomfortable with it. Or with with Instagram as well, with like all the Facebook tools. Like there've been countless scandals around how Facebook used data, but we continue to use Facebook, right? Because there are other reasons for it. So I think what we can do is use models that are ethically trained as much as you can. Personally, find a line that you're comfortable with on how you use the output of AI and how often you use it, and kind of take it from there. But I feel that we've crossed the line where we're not going back anymore. Like it's out of the box now. So it's more of finding a position that you're comfortable with, like as a person and as a creative as well. Like for your example, like I understand again why using AI is great for someone in your position, like wanting to create engaging content like en masse, do it fast to engage with an audience and keep it fresh. And AI is a great tool for that, but there is of course this trade-off. And I think it was interesting what you said with like when you used it up to a point, no one seemed to notice or mind, but when you crossed, like you used it in another way, then it's like the alarm bells went off. Like I find that like navigating that line really interesting. I think that's something that we all kind of need to find a position on.
Of course. Yeah, to me, I haven't answered that to myself, honestly. I just saw that there was a big people were upset about it. I mean, it was a couple of people, let's say 3, 4, 5 comments, but still it was noticeable. And for me, the simple change was then to use something that we created with my graphic designer that we were like trying to to implement for a long time, and then we finally now managed to do so. So I have this kind of corporate design or whatever that we made with the designer, and now my carousels have more this kind of template, and then I put some photos in and my texts and whatnot. So it has now a different shape, and this problem is solved in a way. And I mean, I did a lot of research then with people that are in my audience, like, why do you feel this is not right? And then it was all about this topic that, yeah, you could have hired a graphic designer and whatnot. But then in the end, they also were like blaming it back to me. Imagine someone makes Foley with a tool and they could have hired you. And I think then now we are like in this line where your tool comes into play, because then I would have to complain about everyone who uses your tool and not hiring me when they wouldn't hire me at all before they had your tool, because now they can maybe do some stuff that helps them on their way, as you mentioned, with the picture editor that now can produce some better quality sound for the producers or whatnot. But this picture editor never would have hired me in the first place. And my role comes later in that chain, and the quality that I produce is something else. And also for me as a creator, if I would hire an animator to do all those B-roll videos for my content, I mean, where the money would come from to pay that person, because this content game is much more an, let's say, a marketing expense that I have, rather than that I'm able to monetize on that content. And I think, this is also what people have to consider if they blame others. Like, okay, in which context is this all happening? And if I knew a tool that would generate me those images more ethically, I definitely would go for it. It's time. The thing is, like, do I have the time, to actually go deep into that? And is it a priority for me? And what comes to mind is this, the generative AI in terms of music. And I feel that the music that can be generated really sounds great these days. And there are interesting genres evolving from that. So, for example, we have some, let's say, Islamic traditional texts. And there was one guy who then put that into a reggae format. And
That's cool.
I love reggae, and I have a deep connection to those texts, those Arabic texts. And now hearing that both together really does something to me. And I love reggae music, and I love good, well-produced reggae music. And what this AI came up with is actually great, in terms of arrangement, and also what the singers sound like, and all the different details that are in there. It's kind of blowing my mind.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I think, like, for me, it's just another tool. It's just another tool and tool set that helps you get where you want to go. And as a creative, you want to use all the tools at your disposal as fast as you can to get to your vision. I think that's what's exciting about it. There are obviously lots of sticky questions about the ethical nature of it. But yeah, I mean, I think your example there with the animator is like, you wouldn't have been hiring an animator because you don't have the budget, availability, and the time to go back and forth with the animator to do it. So it wouldn't be an option, and it's opened up opportunities for you, which is exciting. I think it's the same. It's the same with the things that we do. Like, I honestly don't think that the tools that we have are putting these people out of work, not directly, because people on productions will be hiring Foley artists, and they always will do, because there's a degree that I don't think you're ever going to be able to automate. It's like people who we're filling a gap with someone who maybe wants that sound and wants to try it, who was never going to reach for the budget to hire a Foley artist, unfortunately. I think that's the reality of it, and we have that feedback from a lot of people working on certain productions where up front they tell them, like, there's no budget for X, Y, and Z. So, but there is budget for you, and we'll hire you to do it. So that person's placed in a position where they have to be creative on how to deliver the end result, and we help them with those problems. But the high end of the industry will always continue to exist, and I think you're plugging a gap in the same way that you have done there with, you were never in a position to hire an animator, but you wanted that result. We're doing the same thing with a certain proportion of the audio leaning market. I think it's the same type of question. Like, those those video editors are not going to be reaching for a budget to hire a Foley artist, unfortunately, in the early stages of a project. They just need to get the sound in. And, the more we can help them do that, the more success, hopefully, that project will be. And again, hopefully, the more people appreciate audio, and they'll realize that, that last 20%, you need to go and hire someone to get you that last 20%. And I do advocate for that.
From what I feel, I mean, I cannot prove it because I never used it to that extent, but I feel that with your tools, you can also come to that 100% end result if you actually know what you're doing. I mean, not maybe stand alone and only use it, but I feel when I now would go back to a sound designer's position and actually get back on my desk and pull sounds from a library and design sounds within a DAW, I would, of course, use Foley as my go-to when I'm kind of stuck, and maybe I would even start recording some sounds here in my room, and then I would go and pull all the sounds from the library that I'm kind of missing. And then I would use your tool to actually get more creative on the thing or get quicker results. But still, I think I would use it and I would come to that 100% because I am a professional and I've done this for now 15, 20 years almost. So I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm looking for. And I feel your tool can actually help me to get to my 100% end result quicker.
That's
so
great.
It's not only for beginners or people who want a semi-professional result, right?
Yeah, of course not. Yeah, we have professionals using it on professional projects like all the time. Again, it's just another tool in their tool set to help them work under the conditions that they've been given. And we're in a very challenging time for our industry, and that's nothing that you and I cannot. We can't really affect that. But what we can do is respond to the circumstances and do everything we can to try and get the result that a client is looking for. Right? That's what we do as audio people who are basically we're service providers essentially. We provide a service of high quality professional audio as fast and as competitively as possible. And it's a competitive world now. With all types of productions. Everyone's looking for the most affordable way to get the highest quality result.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's the global world in which we live. So that's not going away. So it's up to us as creatives to try and navigate that and get paid by meeting the needs of the client. Really, that's the reality. Unfortunately.
Yeah, 100%. I think all the mentors that I had also had that kind of mindset. I remember being with Lee Herrick in London on a big mixing stage, and he was responsible for the dialogue and ADR. And he told me back then, Bastian, I don't have a emotional attachment to any of those dialogue lines. If the client wants me to exchange it or record it again or whatever, do something with it, I'm happy to do it. It's not that the work that I did up front now is compromised when they ask me for something else. I just go ahead and do it, and what helps the project, what the end client wants. This is at the end what makes everyone happy and what pays my bills. And it's not that ego of I edit the dialogue this way and it should stay like that.
Yeah, I've heard stories from people saying, okay, well, I've been on a mixing stage and they've suddenly come in the next day and they'll be like, oh, the edit's changed. Or all of a sudden we've changed the VFX in the shot and you've got 5 minutes to redesign. These giant gold rings have suddenly appeared on screen and we want sound for it. Man, I need you to do it in 5 minutes. And someone will be like, okay then. And they pull out one of our tools and they wrangle, work their magic, and they manage to meet that goal. So it's like when you find yourself in that scenario, you need something to help you with that problem. And those problems seem to arise more and more frequently these days. Like, again, even the idea of picture lock these days it's become so fluid that it changes all the time, right? So we have all these tools to help us manage the enormous amounts of assets, both visual and audio, that go back and forth constantly as a project evolves in real time. That happens to everyone as well. So again, this is the way that the production environment seems to be evolving, and we're responding to that.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. Still, I feel a lot of good audio gets thrown under the bus.
Absolutely. Or just muted. in a mix.
Yeah, I mean, I was yes. My wife, she doesn't want to watch movies in original, and I almost cannot watch the German dubbed versions. So it's really hard for me to get around these things. I mean, with a like James Bond movie, I can do it because it's very well done, and I'm kind of used to it from my childhood, to this kind of style. But then these like Netflix series, it's sounding horrible. And then we watched one episode of something yesterday, and there was no footsteps in the mix. And I'm working my butt off here every day, and my brain is kind of all on the footsteps right now, let's say. And then I'm watching something, and they just muted the footsteps in the international version, so that there was then some Foley popping up here and there, but no footsteps. And I felt like this is such a lower cinematic experience like that, because there's so much missing, and people, I don't know, maybe might even not notice or don't really care on their sofa. I don't know.
Yeah, but it goes to show how important that stuff is when it's missing. And I've seen this, watching videos or watching movies or whatever with people who are not audio people, and you put something on where the sound is bad, and everyone's like, nah, like it's either really bad or something's wrong. And what's wrong is the audio's not right. Right. And
maybe people grab their phones quicker or just stop the show or something. I don't know, actually, because in my mind,
they don't even have the audio on. Maybe they're just like double dual screening the whole time. Yeah, that would be sad. I hope that's not the case.
Yeah, and I felt kind of sorry in a way for the person who maybe have mixed that, because maybe there was a time constraint that didn't really allow to put in the footsteps, or maybe there was not even the delivery properly done, so there was no footsteps for them to mix in, and just a basic layer of M&E or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, localization stuff is a whole art to itself and a massive logistical exercise. I know someone who does that, and when you hear them describe all the different things they need to do for all the different languages for just one, TV series, it like blows your mind.
I'm also kind of happy that I'm not a re-recording mixer now. To have all these specs now for the international deliveries of those series and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny one though, because when you go through it that way, you're like, the amount of work needed to be done in audio is now greater than ever before because of all these things, because of all the globalization of the content, all this stuff. What seems to be changing is that the bigger projects are not being commissioned as much these days. That seems to be the case from what everyone's saying in the industry for lots of reasons, and that then has a trickle down effect further down. How is that? Have you seen that as well? How is that?
What do you mean by it? They are that much commissioned with budget, or?
Well, yeah, I mean, fewer and fewer bigger movies being made, fewer bigger series being made on streaming platforms. Like streaming platforms are preferring to try and commission things like reality TV shows and stuff because they're cheaper, faster to turn around, rather than high quality drama, which obviously requires a lot more work from all disciplines, including audio, and that having a knock on effect on the work that people are getting. Like that seems to be what I'm hearing as well.
I can't really tell because no one ever asked me to work on a reality kind of project.
yeah. I don't know how I would feel about that. Yeah.
I mean, what I can say is that there are certain projects from that realm that need in a certain way, they need like a high-end audio thing because of the format or whatever, or they just need some special audio, and then sometimes they hire me. Like I did like a reality kind of, how is that called? Like a documentary with some with some fictional acting around it. There's like a term for that. You have a documentary and a real setting of things, but then throughout the film there are always kind of dramatized scenes that show that action in a cinematic way, and then they need Foley for that, or a very high-end documentary that needs an additional layer of sound, and then they ask me to do some Foley for it. And I actually like doing documentary Foley. It's mostly for cinema, of course.
How does that differ to cinematic Foley, for want of a better word?
In a way that you not only blend into the production sound, but you blend into that era of time. And this kind of feels very interesting, that when I have something from the 50s and then the footsteps that I record, they have to also sound like that in a way, in a documentary kind of way. And it's interesting that the ear does a lot of the work already, because I'm not like inventing the wheel again here for these kind of sounds. It's maybe a little bit more high cut, or maybe already me intuitively, when I see this image, I come up with something else. It's cannot really describe that, but in the end, it matches that kind of period or whatever pretty well. And that's maybe the big difference, that you can, that the way of realism is kind of different, but the principle is the same. It actually then works on screen, and you think that is actually an original recording or whatever.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean that's the strange aspect of Foley that you're using it to make it feel real by doing something that's completely not real.
Yeah, and the brain does its part.
Yeah,
and our conception habits maybe also do. I mean, there's so many sounds that are not real at all, but we kind of take them for granted because we heard them so many times in movies. The biggest example is, of course, like weapon rattling.
I was gonna say that. Yeah. If your weapon rattles, you're in reality, you're really in trouble. But in a movie, you need it.
Yeah, and then even more basic, the whole topic of cloth movement. When you think about it, like in real life, those small movements that we do now, they would never catch our ear or make a big sound unless you have like a very distinct outfit. But in films, we create those sounds and put them everywhere, and it kind of helps to get closer to the protagonist, and has nothing to do with realism. But in a cinema, it kind of helps to get closer to the story and to get more involved. And I get feedback oftentimes from Foley editors that they say like, yeah, thanks for the cloth pass. It must have been a lot of work, but it actually really helps.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So I feel, to be honest, that the cloth is something that might be the hardest thing to regenerate, or to maybe come up with your tools on that quality level. I played around with this genes and did this AI kind of setup in Krotos Studio and tried to, do some cloth sounds, but I was kind of lost. I didn't really feel it at all. Maybe I have to get more practice in it, but I think that's the hardest thing to actually crack for this kind of making things quicker accessible. What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think what we have there for cloth, we have a couple of different ways of doing it. It definitely. Let me start again. How you use it makes a huge thing. Like I think, because I was one of the people who designed some of those early systems, I can get a reasonable result most of the time. But I've seen lots of people use it. It is like an instrument to itself. I don't think it's anywhere near as detailed as a real performance, but it's a good starting point, particularly if you're in a hurry. To do it really accurately and doing it really convincingly for every case is extremely difficult with a technology. And we could easily have spent 6 months just doing that one thing, and I don't think it would. Yeah, but
okay.
Yeah.
So maybe you should
not do that.
You should maybe give a tutorial, or maybe there's a tutorial about how to craft cloth sounds with your tool.
Yeah. It's a good point. Maybe we don't have one specifically dedicated to that. That's very possible. Maybe I should do that.
I would definitely watch it.
Yeah, thank you. I would
So,
appreciate your feedback.
so another question, because when I used Krotos Studio, I play back the timeline in Pro Tools, and then I click, let's say, the footsteps, and then it generates a file that I then have to drag into my timeline.
Yes.
Correct. The problem
Yes,
for
that's
me
one way to
is,
do it, yeah.
like, why can I not hit record, click in the tool, and then it has the sounds in the timeline already, because then I don't have to worry about the sync again.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So that would be a restriction of Pro Tools itself. It will not allow us to do such a thing. You can do that exact thing if you're working in DaVinci Resolve, for example. You can run Krotos Studio on a track, and you can just arm that track, hit record, and that software is set up automatically to record the audio and print it in sync on the same track, which is an amazing feature, which I love. So Pro Tools, for example, won't let you do that. But a way to get around that would be to set up another audio track with Krotos Studio as the input, very much like you would. So you basically record the output of the plugin, and then you perform on the sync. You will keep the sync. That would be the way that I would get around it in Pro Tools.
With an instrument track.
If you can either route the output of the. So if you create an audio track, you can either set the audio track to have Krotos Studio as an input, or you might need to route the output of the instrument to a bus and then back to the audio. But you should be able to do that when you're just recording the output of the instrument. Then you're just treating it almost more like a live object, and you're just doing a take. That would be the way that I would get around that problem in Pro Tools. But you're absolutely right. That is a limitation of it, in that we're using that workflow, which is annoying, because you want it to work in the way you described. And to be honest, one of the biggest challenges we have is that we have to work around the limitations of the host technologies all the time, because they're not set up to do this type of thing.
Which speaks for you, because then your tools are already like thinking out of the box, which is always the best thing to do when you're working creatively.
It is, but it makes your life difficult all the time. And literally every product we make has a different out of the box problem that we then have to figure a way to wrangle around. And the other problem is that each of these host applications that we support has a different way of wrangling the problem. So not only do you have to solve the problem once, you usually have to solve it 5 different times and then make it look like you've solved it in one way, which is very challenging.
Can you tell me a little bit about this whole business operation? You mentioned that you started using Max DSP, and then starting at Krotos made it more like a business, a real business. Like what are the challenges, and also like, what do you sell more? Licenses, subscriptions, or sound effects? Where do you make your revenue? And what is, if you have to describe the whole business that you have to deal with as head of product, how does it differ from, let's say, my business reality as a freelancer?
Well, a lot to unpack there. So, we are now mainly a subscription business. That is the majority of our business now with Krotos Studio, because it covers the most things and it has the widest reach of an audience. So that is our main business now. The plugins are still a big part of our business. Then they're not the main driver anymore, but they're still a very big part of what we do. The libraries are a lower part of what we do, but we always record sound because it feeds into everything else. So it works quite nicely as a balance. I guess the sort of business side, comparing it to the work that you do and the way that you do it, is that your work is generally, I assume, like project to project based, and you're brought in to do a particular job on a particular project, and then you would mainly leave that project, from how I understand. For us, it's like an ongoing thing of supporting existing customers and then continuing to try to move those products forward so people continue to use them, and in the subscription model continue to want to pay for them. You can leave our products at any time if you want to. It's up to us and up to me to encourage you to keep using them, and keep them meeting your needs. So that's an ongoing challenge, and it gets harder all the time. So yeah, it's more like it's like a slow line that you have to keep moving, and generally speaking, it has its own momentum, which is nice. So you don't have to worry about, the next project and the next project and the next project. So it's nice to have, an underlying sort of business, momentum, which is nice. Versus, it's one of the main reasons why I ended up working for the company versus being a freelancer. Like, I found the freelance existence exhausting, just because the project-to-project nature of it, and you never really know what's going to happen and where, you might have a few projects lined up, but beyond that, you've got no idea. So I do like that aspect of the work. It presents different challenges.
Yeah, of course, you are right with my reality project to project. And this is still like 90% of my revenue comes from those projects. And I'm thankful for that. People see the level of quality that I can come up with. And I think marketing here also plays a big role. This business, as you mentioned, is really hard. And I was employed for almost 15 years. And then once I started working at Ubisoft, I needed a freelance gig from the film world, to pay some of my dentist invoices. And it was so hard to find a quick job, because I had no freelancer network. I only had my contacts from the employment. Yeah. And then it was so hard to find something, even though I worked in this industry for so long and I really knew what I was doing back then as well. And luckily I found then one movie I could do a Foley editing. I took some vacation and I made this happen. But then once I had the idea to actually go on my own again, or maybe for the first time in that industry, I knew that I have to do some content or marketing or whatever. And I built this whole thing into my world from the very beginning. Like the first studio that I built, I had to unfortunately tear it down after it was finished. That's another story, but it had everything in there, not only to make the best possible sound, but also to capture it on video, lighting and cameras. And this was the whole idea, to get myself known as a Foley artist. And then I started thinking, okay, what if AI takes over my game or whatever, the industry gets more tricky and tricky and no jobs are coming? What are potentially different income streams? And as I enjoy teaching, I then founded the Foley Guild. And before that, I did one-on-one coaching for people who wanted like a modular Foley setup in their working environment, which I still do to this day. And I enjoy that. And I feel there is a big part of the future of every sound professional. If we're not also, let's say, record sound libraries or build really tools that help other sound designers in Reaper or whatever, there are many ways I feel that a sound professional can now generate additional income streams, and it feels that it's very necessary to do this these days.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when I started as a audio professional, when was that? 16 years ago. I don't think it was such a thing. Like now, it's like the marketing of yourself and your skills is crucial, and it's almost like you have to double the amount of work now. Not only do you have to be good at what you do, but good at promoting and presenting what you do, which is a completely different skill set as well. Like, I always think that you've done that always extremely well. And, I always followed and really enjoyed your content for a long, long time before we, got in touch fairly recently. And I think, you're a great example of a way to balance those things and showcase your skills and promote that. But I think you just have to do it these days.
Thank you for that feedback. I mean, I appreciate it. And
you're welcome.
There are people who might not be as comfortable as I am in front of a camera. I mean, I come from rapping. I was in front of the mic on stage like all my life. So this kind of, and I also grew into this, to work with camera and to make now even longer form videos on YouTube. I mean, that's also another stage, If you just do reels on Instagram, it's one thing, but if you do long form YouTube content, this is just another game then. You need a lot more preparation, research, and also endurance. Quick one. If you feel that you need a boost in terms of inspiration and someone who helps you think out of the box in terms of your own career and what you can do to market yourself or to get out there and build your network properly, consider joining the Foley Guild. This place is something I created to help you not only with Foley techniques and your individual recording setup in your studio to capture Foley sounds professionally. It's also the place where I can mentor you personally on the things that you want to achieve next, and I can help you think out of the box and be involved in that process. I really enjoy that. I feel that's something of a gift that I have that I want to share within the Foley Guild. And if you feel stuck right now and you feel that you need an input like that, consider joining the guild. I'm happy to welcoming you there. Let's go back to the episode. Because it takes me sometimes, 4 to 6 or 8 hours to record a YouTube video. And then I have luckily a team who edits my stuff. But then I think you have to see this from this perspective. I pay my team a substantial amount of money every month to come up with all that output that I generate. And in the end, it helped me to establish myself on the freelance market as a Foley artist. I definitely gained some new clients that I couldn't have reached without all these videos, which I'm very thankful for. Because now I worked on some indie movies from the US. I worked some French stuff even. They're very particular about their Foley. So I feel very honored to do also some French stuff. And also my old contacts from Berlin, I could get some decent work there as well. But yeah, I feel that there are so few people now that are very established in the industry, and I don't know how to put this, because I see people in the movie credits that when you look them up, they don't have a huge following. They just have 300 contacts on LinkedIn. I don't know.
Or less. I've seen that people have had to actually search out, like, how am I even going to get in contact with this person? I've had that problem
this thing exists, and I feel that this is also valid. And I come from that era where you started as an intern, then you maybe made an apprenticeship, you had your mentors, you worked with people, you learned from people, and then now you're in that realm, you deliver great work, and people tend to hire you over and over again. That is one side of the truth. And the other side of the truth is, when I did some research lately on a movie that actually won an Oscar, I then looked up the Foley artists, and there was one woman who actually is looking for a job right now. And she has 30 years of experience, won an Oscar. And I feel like, okay, this is the reality these days. So if people are happy and lucky and they have enough money with what they do, I'm happy for them. But to do this kind of extra work, can also build a safety net for times when you don't have these jobs coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I see that more and more, and you see it with sound designers for a long time, of like the availability of being able to sell your own library as a small income source. Like that really came around probably 10 years ago, and all these little income sources. I think people need to be really on this stuff more and more, because it's becoming very risky to be a professional creative. Like very challenging, very, very difficult, definitely harder than when it was when I was doing it freelance, like 100%. So anything you can do for that. But one thing I do want to come back to is your rapping career. You can't just throw that in and expect me not to pick up on it. So tell me more about that.
I started exploring hip-hop age 16 because a friend of mine just dumped a bunch of CDs on me. Back then we were burning CDs.
Yeah.
And then a friend of mine had like 30, 40 CDs with all the 90s hip-hop, both American and also some German stuff that was available. And I was binging that and really sparked my interest. Also, I was interested in, let's say, how a record is being made. So I looked into this kind of thing. Okay, you record with a microphone, and then I bought a record player. But I really wanted to try this rapping myself, and then in particular freestyle rapping. And somehow that sparked something in me, or started something within me that I could never stop. So after I tried it for the first time at age 16, I then was totally just focusing on that. So this was the only thing that mattered to me for many, many years, actually.
Amazing.
I dropped out of school. I then annoyed all my friends that we met every day after school, and then I was rapping, and then they started rapping with me together, and they maybe endured 1 year, and then they were fed up, and then I found other people to rap with, and then I had my first crew, and then we started recording our first album, and we toured, and we did a lot of shows, all low key, and I never really made it as a music professional, but I really tried for many, many years, let's say 7 years. And my early understanding, I remember my parents, I told them there are only two things I'm interested in: music and sound engineering. And as I was then prioritizing the music for 7 years until I was 24, 25, something like that, the engineering part always not really evolved pretty much, because when there was an opportunity to go on stage, I rather did that and not chose to be on the mixing desk or whatever. And then I was only intern in the music studio. I was only doing the stage handwork, and I was not the main front of house mixer for a big, band or whatever. And then I tried everything in the music world, in the events world, and always just was the helper around. And this is also then the kind of money you make with that. And it's not satisfying because you're not on the mixing desk, you're just carrying the cable sort of thing. And then I discovered the film sound, because I was living in Potsdam back then, and there was this film school, and I thought, okay, I never looked into film sound. Maybe let's study film sound there. And this was so hard to get enrolled. I applied. They didn't accept me. And then I just emailed myself into the industry, started on set, and then I hated the set. So I started interning in post-production. I loved that. And then I found the right place there. I did an apprenticeship. Then I learned everything about sound effects editing, sound design, mixing, recording, ADR and Foley on real projects for 2.5 years. And from that, I then landed my first position as an intermediate sound effects editor. And then at that company, I stayed for another 7 years. And then I evolved into becoming a Foley artist. And with that skill set, I was then hired by Ubisoft, worked there for 5 years. And then I used all this knowledge and then created the Foley teacher and built my own studio. And now I'm doing mainly Foley for series and movies and also games.
Well, what a journey.
And then the games thing, as you mentioned, it's so hard to get jobs for video games right now. Everyone is talking about it. Most of my audience dream about working in game audio. And I mean, I have this track record with AAA titles and 5 years at Ubisoft, but it's the same kind of thing. I was full-time in-house, and I don't have a freelance network for this kind of jobs. So what I started doing is go to industry events and connect with people. And then my content already helped a lot. Just wearing that hat at Develop Brighton got me into so many conversations, which is great. But then also there, it's a long road, Even if I'm a professional with 15, 20 years experience, track record, AAA games, now getting people to know me, I still don't have jobs. And then again, content is actually a real key here, because for the last 6 weeks, I only released videos about video games. And next week I will work on a video game on my budget terms, and
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah,
so I really can really advocate people to to market themselves in the best possible way, in a what feels
Yeah.
authentic to them. You know, I'm not saying go in front of a camera, but think out of the box and make something meaningful and help other people with what you know, and then things will come your way.
The building a network thing is such a crucial thing in any professional creative like world, and no one really tells you about that. And especially when you go to school and you study this stuff, no one ever tells you about this. It's one of my big objections with like a lot of education for creative industries is no one tells you anything really about the reality of what it's going to be like when you actually try to make it a profession, and no one tells you these things at all. So yeah, we did a lot of that in the early days of the company. We went to as many shows as we could have. We were the Dehumanizer guys for about 5 years, and we were all the shows, built, you know, got to know loads of amazing people, and that was a great way of doing it. So yeah, people should definitely try and do that as much as they can. And it's crucial.
It's also something I really enjoy when I work with people on the coaching side or in the Foley Guild. You know, just I talk to someone, they explain their story, and then I kind of feel this inspiration of giving these people ideas, and then they can start picking up on those ideas and make something out of it. And I really love that process, that I can kind of inspire people to things they haven't thought of. I think that's a special talent that I have, luckily, and I'm very thankful for that talent. And then when I think back, one of my first mentors in the apprenticeship, after I finished, he said, I see the biggest skill that you have is your networking skill. And
very important skill.
So that was something that I had kind of naturally. But in the end, I mean, when I double down on where this comes from, I'm a person, when I want something, I really go deep onto achieving it. And then I kind of think creatively in a way that, okay, what do I have at hand, and how can I merge all these components to actually make something out of it? And for example, there was this guy that I mentioned in the beginning, Lee Herrick. I was in London assisting him on big movies, big blockbuster movies, by simply serving him coffee, getting in touch with him, and then connecting the dots. Because he was in Berlin recording some ADR for that Liam Neeson movie, and with the coffees I made, I just found out that he's working at Goldcrest and at Delane Lee as a freelancer. He always rents those rooms and then works there. And my prior research was on how do I get access to some facilities in London. And there was a program it's called Leonardo da Vinci. So for students, it's called Erasmus for the European Union. Yeah, so you can exchange as a student. And for apprentices, there is this thing, Leonardo da Vinci. And they mentioned it in the school that I had to attend. And I attended this school only because I wanted to learn sound design. And the only way to learn that was to become an apprentice. So they wouldn't accept me as a student. I couldn't just get hired. Internship was kind of ending. And then there was this professional opportunity of becoming an apprentice. And I hated the idea of going to a boring school and learn something about media technology and sit down with some teenagers and stuff like that. You know, it was like the last thing I wanted, but it was the only way to learn from the people I knew that if I learned from them, this will elevate me the quickest possible way. And then sitting in that boring school, they mentioned this program, Leonardo da Vinci. And I thought, that's a great thing. You know, maybe I can take this funding and then make it to London. And with that idea, meeting the next guy, connecting the dots, I actually made it. And the trip was paid for. I made my experience there, and it helps me to this day because I have it on my website that I was working at Goldcrest and Delane Lee. Yeah.
Amazing, yeah. Yeah, you've got to have the determination to push through all these things. And you get it'll so much rejection.
And you have to find the right people to work with and to learn from. Because I was sitting there with 10 years of experience as a, let's say, self-taught sound engineer, whatever. So I knew what a compressor is, I knew what a mixing desk is, I knew what music has to sound like and how to actually mix a proper song. But then sitting on the first day at dialogue editing, even though I was watching people for a week doing it, I was sitting there and I couldn't do a thing. But that then even that helped me to ask the right questions then on the next day. And then I started working with those questions and actually got going. And then it took a couple of years, you know, to come up with results on my own. And then and I think people nowadays, they don't understand this, you know, that it takes really a long time to develop taste, and you have to have the right, if you just learn from YouTube videos, it's really hard, you know, to get to my level.
You know, you learn all this stuff by doing it, and doing it like a lot, and getting feedback and experience and all this stuff. And you know what I find really satisfying now, when I don't do sound work that often now, but when I do, I can usually get to the result or the sound I want in my head very, very quickly. But that's just because of experience. And if I think back to 20 years ago or 25 years ago, when I started working with computers trying to do the same thing, it would literally have taken me a month to get that far. And I'm self-taught as well, so I have no idea what I was doing. No, it would have taken me literally a month to achieve what I've just done in an hour. Yeah. But that's 20 years of like slowly getting better at it. I mean, it doesn't happen by accident. And
I think the passion is also what unites all the great sound people out there.
Yeah.
No one who's not really hungry for that, I think can come up with this kind of dedication, and then the end result is the level of quality. Yeah. So I think, having said that, thank you very much for that cool conversation. I learned a ton about things I didn't know about AI and what it is to run a company like yours, because I'm interested in the whole business side of things nowadays, because it feels so interesting to, you know, build not only a personal brand, but also then to try and monetize on it and find ways that actually helps people. And I'm in that process of marketing myself, or getting marketing angles and talking to people in the right way so that they join my Foley Guild. I'm questioning this all over and over again. And also there, it's this learning curve, and the conversations like the one that we just have helped me a lot. So thank you.
Oh, yeah, thank you. It was really fascinating to talk through all these things with you and hear about your experience and your approach as well. So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
All right, then hopefully we can continue this another time.
I hope so.
Thanks for staying up until the end. It really means a lot. If you are using Krotos, please let me know in the comments what you use, how you use it, where it helped you, what you don't like about it maybe. And I'm reading everything, and I'm very curious about what's going on really with people who use these tools. I use it myself here and there, and I'm exploring them. So therefore I need also your input. Thanks again for watching, and see you in one of the next videos. Peace, the Foley Teacher.